All right, welcome back to John Howard Week 2024. We're here on day 4. It's Thursday, March 7th, and we're back for another episode. As a reminder, if you want to find any of the videos from the first 3 days of the week, today's video, or tomorrow's, you can go to the John Howard Society of PEI YouTube channel, and you can also find more information on our website. So today's topics are centered around coordinated access and some of the programs that are a part of that. And we've got 2 guests today, double trouble. So first we've got Rae from Salvation Army, and we've got Ashley from the Housing Department. So Rae, I'll let you kick it off and sort of introduce yourself and what you're up to and your name and everything.
Sure. So I'm Rae Sherren. I'm with the Salvation Army. I supervise a supportive transitional housing program called New Roots. I've been with the Army for just over 2 years now. I don't know what else you want me to say.
That's great.
Ashley.
Ashley, over to you then.
All right. I am Ashley Gillis. I am the Provincial Housing Navigator with the Department of Housing, Land, and Communities. I work with individuals who are experiencing homelessness, individuals who have complex housing needs, something that goes beyond that supply affordability factor. And I work with them to try and connect them to different resources and try and find the appropriate housing solutions.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So coordinated access is certainly kind of the umbrella under which we all come together here. We come from different sort of positions. I'm more on the background of managing some of the logistical things and policies. Rae, you're managing one of the programs where people are a part of. And then Ashley, you're working with folks to connect them to resources, as well as helping out with another program that we'll get into a little bit later. But let's talk about sort of some of the components of coordinated access. So let's start out with this idea of matching and sort of what that entails. We won't get into sort of the details for each program at the moment, but let's just talk about this idea of matching versus just randomly putting people's names on lists and waiting till their name comes up for something and hoping it works out. So whichever one of you wants to jump in and sort of give us some sense as to this thought of matching versus other.
I like the coordinated access system because we can all get together in the group that we do and talk about each client so that we're setting them up for more for success, right? And we can give our opinions and our experiences with that client so that we're better supporting them.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's like you talked about, it's collaborative, right? And most of us are working with the same individuals. We all have, the expectation to help, the yearn to help these individuals. So it's, I could feel that one person is a good fit for maybe a match for a program. And, Rae, if we work with the same person and maybe you think that they may fit for a different program. So it's allowing us to be collaborative and share the information that we have and make sure that that the appropriate matches are made.
Yeah, I remember before coordinated access, when we worked together, 2 years ago, it felt like everybody was in those silos and we were trying to access some of the same programs for the same clients, but didn't know too. So like people were doing like double the work, and now we can come together weekly and say, this is what we've done for that person, so that resources are being used better too.
Yeah, and it allows it kind of takes away from that one person kind of being the gatekeeper to the programs, right? Where you have to go just to one person, and then they kind of have that yes or no say whether someone fits in with the program. And it allows everybody just to be at the table, right, and have access to that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think you both hit on some of the key points there that are worth highlighting. So this idea of collaboration and sort of everybody having a voice in the process, I think is one of the key components of like you said, being able to get perspective and input from so many different service providers, particularly when many of these folks are complex and are working with people from a multitude of different services and organizations. So yeah, we're able to get more input and get more information about them, which I think helps when we look at the matching process and try to see where are they a fit and what are they a fit for.
Yeah. My favorite is when one person has not heard from a client for a while, and then another person around the table will say, "Oh, I've heard from them, they're housed," or "I've heard from them, they're good," and it's just it just makes it so that people aren't feeling like they're not doing their jobs either, right? Because you're thinking, I haven't heard from this person, I should have, connected with them. But because now you know that they've connected with somebody else.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like one person can't do it all, right? We certainly need all of the people at the table to work together for the same individuals, right? It's we have one goal, and it's to help these clients, and that's what I think that coordinated access has really helped to do, is to bring us all together and work collaboratively, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we're such a small community.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So that it's really important for us to all be talking together.
Yeah, that's a great point where coordinated access has an opportunity to be even perhaps more effective somewhere like PEI, where the community is smaller because we're already tight knit and there's already such a communication between service providers, or a familiarity at least, that it can give a bit of a mechanism for that communication to come together.
Yeah. And I can say I certainly noticed it firsthand. Like I was just back from a maternity leave, right? So the coordinated access was we were just kind of working on implementing the BNL, those meetings, very first processes, right? And then I leave for a year and come back. It certainly was a little bit of an adjustment from what I was used to, but it was a really great adjustment. You really saw how everybody had come together, because prior to that, it was, like you said, we're all working in silos, but working to help the same people. And when you came back and you saw it, and everybody is, contributing to the BNL meetings, and you can certainly see that everybody is willing to work with each other since coordinated access has come in, right?
Yeah.
And it's everybody around the table has the same opportunity to help the clients, versus when we were kind of working those silos. Well, I have access point to, this program, so I'm going to put my client in there. There is no more my client. It's, whether it be an individual or,
And it opens up for caseworkers to have conversations, and you're not feeling like you're stepping on somebody else's toes because they've put in a lot of work with someone, whereas you might have an option or an idea for somebody, and you can just go straight to that other caseworker and work together.
Yeah, I think the theme of what you're hitting on there is, like you sort of said, it's not my client, it's our client, right? And nobody's gatekeeping programs as a community. And so we've taken that approach from organization X's client or organization Y's a client to a client of the community.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a great step in terms of collaboration and working together. It also feels like, and maybe you two can speak to this, but feels like there's a little more, maybe I would use the phrase like buy-in or hope or optimism around this process now that we've sort of, you talked about, kind of refined it over the past year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially with the programs that are matched, that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, I assume. Before, there was nothing that came through. There was no units, right? So you were seeing, you'd go through a meeting and it would just be, you just kind of lose hope because, there's no unit to match with today. And that was kind of the theme week after week. And now when you come back, it's there's opportunity. There's hope that, individuals are going to be matched with other people, right?
Or get the support they need before they can be matched.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's a great point too, right? It can create a conversation about, okay, maybe this person's not a suitable match at this time, but here are some of the reasons why, or some of the things that if they could get some support on in the meantime, that might make them a candidate for that program.
Yeah, exactly.
Then it gives some direction to the caseworker or the support team to go back and where do we go from here?
Absolutely.
And what I love about this community too is that we were all willing to go through those bumps in the beginning,
Mhm.
right? To make it what it is now. And
Yeah.
we're still working out details, right? But everybody is so open to flexing and supporting each other now, right?
Yeah, Jacinta and I ended our conversation on Tuesday with that as sort of our final note, was like a testament to the work and dedication of the folks in the community, because we have undergone so many transitions and changes, and it would be easy for some folks, and maybe there are some folks out there, but it would be easy for the majority of folks as a whole to sort of be resistant and put up that wall and say, this is too much.
Yeah.
This is a lot to ask.
Yes.
So it's exciting to see that people are instead trying, how can I be a part of this movement towards progress and change?
Absolutely.
So another piece of this is prioritization, and this idea of prioritization. So typically when it comes to other access to things, if you want to get on the list to get a doctor, or if you want to get on the list to get access to subsidized housing, or get access to, get into a group for yoga or whatever it might be. You get thrown on a list and you wait, and then your time comes up and you get the opportunity. Versus this idea of prioritization. So what if we could spend a couple minutes on that, and I'll sort of open it up to you two to give any sort of initial thoughts about this idea of prioritizing folks.
I think, when you talk about kind of being on a wait list, that's that kind of first come, first serve, type of ideology. And when you think about the individuals that we deal with, it can't be a first come, first serve, because some individuals that, we're working with, they should be priority because their health is deteriorating, or the longer that they stay in a certain place, their mental health maybe deteriorates even further. The prioritization piece really, focuses on a person's safety and, a person's need to be stabilized, I guess, and to get housing.
And also it meets people where they're at as well.
Yes.
Right. So that idea of, are they ready? Are they not? Are they willing to work on something, like prioritizing them in that way, so that we're not throwing somebody into a unit or a program that they're not ready for. Right.
Yeah.
So it's that setting people up for success thing, instead of, just throwing something at somebody and saying, try it. Because if you fail so many times, you may not take the learning, and you may, deteriorate in your mental health and all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah. And I like that you talked about this idea of, there are people who are more vulnerable than others, right? And there are people, and, it feels bad because that means that somebody else has to be sort of deprioritized for someone else to be prioritized.
Right.
But it's the reality of the situation of certainly our community, and I think most communities across Canada at this point, that the resources that we have for people are not sufficient at the moment. We don't have enough housing.
Yeah.
We're going through a housing crisis nationally, certainly provincially as well. So we're having to figure out, okay, how do we manage the resources we have as best as possible, knowing that there are some folks that maybe with a little just light touch could figure out their situation, versus these folks that without us intervening and providing some substantial or intensive support and matching them to certain services, they're probably never going to get housed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I think that, that piece has become, and I think there's been a effort to make that more transparent too. Like we've sort of, as a community, landed on our prioritization criteria that's available to people, like service providers within the community can find out that information and understand how we're matching people. And I think that's a good piece too, so that everybody feels like, oh, okay, if my client was prioritized versus someone else's, or theirs was prioritized versus mine, here's why and here's
Yeah.
how that happened. So there's not this feeling of like favoritism.
And and that's the thing. The criteria, the prioritization criteria was created by the community, right? So we all had a say as to what we felt would prioritize a client, and just like you said, that allows people not to feel like there's favoritism anywhere else, or we did that as a community, so we all had that input.
Yeah.
And that's probably a good segue into one of the other components, which is this governance component, which Ashley has recently joined upon. So thank you for jumping in. For folks listening, every community that falls under the Reaching Home umbrella, which is a funding stream through Service Canada for homelessness, Infrastructure Canada. So you have to have a governance committee in place, which is a group of representatives from the community that meet to talk about policies and processes and things like by the prioritization criteria, things like inactivity, so different policies and things. And so that's another thing that certainly was relaunched or restructured in the past, I guess, year or so as well. And so I know you don't really have sort of much experience sitting onto that, but just any thoughts, either of you, on sort of that piece, on some of how you've seen sort of input from the larger group, and then the governance committee kind of ironing out some of those things and then presenting that back, and sort of what you've seen in that process, if you've noticed anything in terms of how that works.
I'm sure you've probably noticed a lot, Ashley, being off, speaking about being off for that long. I know that, being a part of it from the beginning until now, it just, through the processes and everything being defined and all that sort of stuff, it feels easier, right? To get together once a week and speak about the clients and do matching, and there's less questions, right? So we can focus more on what we're actually there to do.
Yes, yeah. Like the governance committee, kind of goes through that policy stuff, and it's not just that committee that's kind of creating it all. It's also with feedback from those around the table too, which I think is a really big part of things. There's sometimes you can have boards of organizations or boards of committees that kind of have the entire say of how things go, and that can really it can really hinder and frustrate those individuals who might be doing that front line or trying to work within the actual program itself. So I think a really great part of the way that this works is that the individuals around the table, caseworkers around the table, organizations around the table, still have input on how things, like how the processes and the policies work.
Yeah, it is a great point of the sort of the feedback loop. Right, like issues pop up within the community, people raise them or have questions about them, and then I bring them to the governance committee and say, hey, I think this is something we should talk about and maybe figure out a formal policy. And then we bring that back to the community at large. And then they talk about, oh, this is working well, or this isn't working well. And you can certainly speak to, as we transition into specific programs, when we look at New Roots, all the changes we've made in terms of processes and policies over the past, 6 to 9 months kind of thing, right? And so I think maybe that's another good piece of something to point out, is this idea of evolution, or the evolving nature of things, and how we've been more willing for things to be fluid and change versus like, oh, we made a decision, this will now forever be the decision. Right? And maybe I think that piece is also something that we've done well as a community.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've touched on the governance and the matching. We've talked a bit about sort of our by name list meetings and what that entails. We talked about prioritization, which does include the SPDAT assessment as part of that piece as well. Jacinta and I chatted a bit about that. But getting that score is also helpful in terms of when we look at the matching process, to give an idea of the ballpark of what level of need this person has. And that's one more indicator that we can use when we have those conversations of, would they be suitable for the program that we're looking at based on the capacity of that program and what kind of folks they can support. Any final thoughts on the sort of general coordinated access stuff before we move into each of the separate programs?
I was going to say that it seems to be working, you know. Like I said, I was there for like the implementation and the process, and it was scary, but it was like, oh, how is this going to work? I think was the biggest part of when when we first implemented, and we didn't have all these processes in place, and
not everybody had jumped on board.
And not
right
everyone had jumped on board.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you're kind of like, hey, how is this going to work? And then there was, kind of that hopeless, well, there's no units at first. And that's how things have to work, right? Like it has to start. But like I said, being off for a year, like it's like a complete 360 the way that the coordinated access is run. And the people that have actually, come on sides and agree with this is the way that it should go. But I think that's because you guys have been able to show that it works, right? We've been successful with matching individuals through BNL to housing placements within your program within 230 Richmond. So it took a little while, obviously, to get there. But like I can say that I'm very, very impressed with the way things have gone in the last year.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, big time.
And I can't wait to see where it goes from here too.
Yeah.
Like, as we, hopefully housing becomes a little bit more accessible and all that sort of stuff, that, what we can do from here moving forward.
Yeah. And I remember going to it was a conference with the folks who implemented it is it Fredericton? Maybe?
Could be.
Yeah. And like just really trying to comprehend how it worked. And again, I don't think that I still really fully comprehend how it worked until I came back and saw it run so smoothly and operated so well. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So thanks for going away for a year.
Right? Yeah, I think that's all we needed. Huh? Hey, I go away for another couple of years.
Correlation versus causation, right? I think it's certainly correlation. We're glad you're back.
Oh,
Yes,
thanks.
we
I'm glad
are.
to be back.
Yeah. All right, so let's shift gears into the two separate programs. Maybe we'll kind of go sort of ping pong back and forth a little bit to give you each a chance to kind of talk and then take a break. So let's start with just a bit of a description about the program and kind of what kind of support it offers. And let's just kind of start there. Whichever one of you wants to jump in first.
Oh, I can go first.
Sure.
So, New Roots Transitional Housing is a program to support men 18 and above who are deemed chronically homeless and are ready to make some change, look at themselves a little bit, and get into a stable housing position. So they can stay with us up to 12 months, more or less, depending on, what their needs are and how they're doing in the program. But it's basically just a support to get them into a good routine, all the life skills practice, all that sort of stuff that some people lose when they're not housed, right? Like budgeting for groceries, doing the dishes, how to clean an oven properly, like all those small little things that a lot of people take for granted. If you're out of practice, it can be really hard to maintain. So within that year, we're working with people based on their individual needs in order for them to have a successful tenancy after they leave. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it helps kind of bridge that gap for folks who going from their experience of homelessness, whatever that situation might be, right into a housing placement sometimes can be pretty overwhelming.
Yes.
And as you outlined, they may not have the skills to manage. So your program's kind of that in between.
We are, yeah. So our focus is bringing them in and moving them out, right? So if somebody came in and only needed, a couple of months to really settle in, get their feet underneath them, grow new roots, so to speak, right? Then we would support them in moving out, like as soon as they felt comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're not like required to be there for any length of time. It's just the opportunity can go up to around 12 months.
Exactly.
But it's individual based on what works for them.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. And that kind of segues into, as somebody gets to that point where they're maybe looking at, okay, I think I can move past this transitional program, but maybe living somewhere with absolutely no supports might be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Enter, Ashley, your program.
Enter 230 Richmond. We don't have a cool name like you. I think we need a cool name like
some
you,
branding.
right? So 230 Richmond is an apartment building, and it has 8 individual units. So we do title it supportive housing, but the individuals live independently in their own apartment unit. Comes fully furnished, so people moving in don't need to go through all that process of getting what they need. And we do have support, but it's very light support, at the elbow support. So you are connected to a caseworker from the John Howard Society, and they are on site most days, but they are meeting with you to work on anything that you kind of want to work on, whether it be connecting to supports. Maybe it's getting an ID done. Maybe you need a health card. Maybe you need to get connected to employment resources. Very client-centered, and it's very light. So it's just someone there. I know if, we all go through life, and, you come through these obstacles, and I know my family's a great support. So sometimes I'm calling my mom to do my taxes, right? Like, so it's not someone that's going to be watching over you 24/7, but it's someone that you can call, because a lot of the individuals that we deal with don't have a whole lot of support, right? And I know myself, I wouldn't be able to go through life without any supports, right? So this is just someone that, like, hey, you got a question? You know what? I'm going to let my caseworker know, and maybe they can direct me into the right direction. There are we call residency requirements, and they're really quite simple. If you could sum them all up, it's basically just being a good neighbor, being a good tenant. Right. But we kind of lay them out, because not everyone knows what a good neighbor or a good tenant is. We don't all have the same idea of what either one is. So we kind of lay them out. Like I said, they're pretty simple rules to follow, and there is no kind of transition period of time. Individuals can stay there for as long as they want, really. Right. But the hope would be is that individuals kind of get themselves in a place where they don't require that light support anymore, and can maybe want to move out independently at that point in time. But if they want that regular support for the rest of their life, then they can stay there, type of scenario. There's no timeline at all. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I think that's where we kind of differ in those, because we're a little bit more heavier in our support. We have people there 24/7.
Yeah.
To help at any time of the day. We're doing a little more heavier casework.
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of there to to assist people, just to be there for support, right? Just to kind of help navigate all the different systems, all the different programs, your day to day sometimes, right? Maybe you need to drive somewhere.
Right.
Like, it could be as simple as that. Or maybe, someone doesn't have a doctor. Well, I need to get in to see a clinic. Well, can you help me find out which walk-in clinic I can go to, or
Right.
what may be the right supports, right? Just very simple, but it's someone there to kind of call on if you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you sort of framed it, like a lot of people They don't have the support system, so it gives them like a go-to person or
Yeah.
a point person.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure where to go. I'm not sure how to navigate this. Well,
Yeah.
I'll start with my caseworker,
Yeah.
and then they can help point me in the right direction.
Yep, exactly. And it is a mandatory part of living within 230 Richmond that you do connect with your case manager. But like we talked about, it's very client centered. So, you don't need someone that's kind of if you don't want it, someone that's holding your hand and always kind of breathing down your neck. It's exactly what you want it to be. And as long as you connect with them, then, we're happy.
Right. It's individualized based on that person's
Yeah.
needs, right? So some folks are going to come in and they're going to need to talk to that caseworker multiple times a week.
Yep.
Other people are just going to check in every so often
Yeah.
and say, hey, things are going pretty good. Just want to give you a heads up and
Exactly.
having quick check-ins. And that probably will change for different folks as they're there longer too.
Yes.
I would imagine, right? If their stability goes up and they've kind of navigated those things a few times with the caseworker, then maybe they don't require as much support as time goes on.
Exactly. Yeah. We like to see like the individuals that maybe match for us are those who maybe haven't been as homeless for maybe as long, or maybe it's kind of like they have the ability to live independently and not require as much as support as someone like New Roots.
Yeah.
And we also, we love to see the transition from New Roots to 230 Richmond to kind of show how that flow of our supportive housing can work, right? To see that successful, okay, you have someone that has gotten some really great, support within New Roots, kind of almost heavy support. You know what? They're doing great. But maybe they still just need a little bit of somebody to be able to talk to. And then, maybe we can talk about moving them into 230 Richmond Street.
Right.
And then that shows that continuum. And that opens up another spot for New Roots for someone else to be matched.
Yes.
Yeah, and that
right?
speaks to sort of that idea of like a housing continuum.
Yeah.
Right. And so, New Roots is a little more towards the early stages. Yours is a little more towards the later stages.
Yeah.
And then kind of like you spoke about, that final stage would be independent living with no support.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, like in an ideal system or world, folks will move to that, which then frees up a spot for people who are at your stage. And then if they came from New Roots, that frees up a spot there. And so we're always looking to kind of help people move through that process at whatever pace works for them.
Exactly. Yeah. And you have to be realistic too. Not everybody will be able to live fully independently, right?
Sure.
Some people may require supports forever, and that's okay. And that's what these programs are for, right? Is we don't have a timeline. So if someone requires a little light support for the rest of their life, great. They can be there, It's a pretty great resource, and I wish we had a whole lot more of them, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go there in a
Yeah.
minute. That's one of the things I wanted to chat about. But so let's talk about the sort of coordinated access matching piece. I think it's helpful for people to know that as we talked about that coordinated access process of people who are experiencing homeless and have had some recent contact with anyone in the community. So that's defined as 90 days. So if they've had any interactions in the last 90 days, that works. They're experiencing homeless currently, and they've had some sort of an assessment done, which was talked about, the SPDAT or the PEI SPDAT, which Jacinta and I kind of spent some time on Tuesday. And so then those folks are presented at the weekly by name list meeting, which we sort of alluded to and we talked a little bit about there. And then from there, we have a discussion as a group and try to match them to one or more services. And so maybe just a quick sort of synopsis of how that's worked so far and what that's looked like in terms of people getting matched and having other workers who are attached to them and what that's been like.
I think for us, before coordinated access in the BNL, it was a little tough for referrals to come in through the Provincial Housing Navigator, find those people, meet up, do an assessment, all the processes. And it took a long time. And then it was really like, if that person wasn't matched to our program, then we'd have to do the whole thing for that person again, and they'd have to go through the whole process, right?
Yeah.
Now, since we've kind of refined the matching through the BNL list, those people will stay on a wait list so that I can, I'll back up a minute. So we match at the BNL meetings, and people can give me their feedback on that person and their experiences with that person, so that I can say, all right, well, we'll give them an interview because they've come up to match through the BNL. And then if I meet with that person and they are a match, we don't have units or we don't have positions in the program, I can put them on a waiting list then, that Josh thankfully keeps under control for me, and come back to them when a position does open up, and we can check in with that person. They don't have to go through the process all over again, which is easier on the clients too, because I just interviewed someone last week who has been through the process a few times and has always wanted a position in the program, and in a place where he would be a fantastic match. So I was able to say, like, you don't have to do this again. Right.
Yep.
You are on the wait list, and when we have a position open up, your name is there. I'm going to be checking back in with you. Like, and it's a peace of mind for him, because he's been waiting for so long, right? And he doesn't have to worry about going through the whole thing all over again.
Right. Doesn't have to retell his story and go through all those details.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is part of that trauma-informed, client-centered piece of that process, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like the matching process, the individuals around the table, you're allowed to bring a client forward, they're matched. I think the service providers around the table are getting really good at understanding both programs,
what the programs
are.
Right.
So, and a lot of times, like, we want to house our clients. And sometimes you really just want to pull the trigger and say, oh my gosh, they're matched. Yeah, they're going to be a great fit for there, right? Mm-hmm. Because you want to give them the opportunity to be housed. But I think that we're all kind of coming together and realizing, what, if I said, yes, they'd be a great fit in there, then I might be doing that client a disservice, because maybe they're not ready to live as independently as maybe 230 might be.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a really great piece of that matching.
Yeah.
And because, like I said, we all want our clients to be housed. We all want them to have that opportunity, but sometimes you may be doing them a disservice if you put them into an independent unit when they're not ready to do that, right? It could just quicken the cycle, like just restart the cycle back into homelessness really, really quickly if they're not ready for that, right?
Yeah. I think it was a good example of kind of that honesty with yourself and as a community with that person, and sort of looking at the long term, right? So, okay, if we matched them and they got in and it quickly broke down, and in hindsight, we kind of knew that might happen, and now they have to go through that process again. And in the meantime, if maybe another opportunity popped up that was more suitable, they may have missed out on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's that piece of that balance that you said we're all kind of navigating and learning from one another of what might work. And if we're not sure, it's like that probably could work, but we're not sure. Well, then we'll match them and we can kind of see what happens at an interview.
And that's a big part of it too. Like, we never used to do really interviews before. So we're just kind of saying, okay, well, we're just going to put that person in here. So I think the interview process, when someone is matched, is really important. It allows us to get to know, the individuals that are going in, and, to see if they actually would be, a good fit or not.
Yeah, and make sure they have an interest too, because when they're brought up, there's sort of an implication or an assumption that they're interested in this program because they've expressed an interest in being housed and working with folks. But then when we get into the specific program, you can go through, like you said, the residency rules, and same thing for you, Rae, and just say, hey, just want to check in with you and make sure this is something you want to be a part of.
Exactly.
So it circles that back to the client. Right?
And we've seen all things happen
Yeah.
too. People have turned down the opportunities
Sure.
because it's not something that they're interested in.
at this point in time,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And that's okay. That opens up space for someone
Absolutely.
else, and that means that wasn't the right move for them.
Yeah.
As we look to wind down here, our time, sort of pose this in different ways, but sort of a thought around for New Roots, kind of what's next, where are things going there, any sort of updates or next steps that you have going on there, and then sort of a similar question for New Roots with maybe that thought about duplicating this model in the future, either in Charlottetown or other communities.
Yeah. So New Roots is in a really good place right now. We have in the last year we've doubled our program. So our program plan is finalized and working through, and staffing is great, and we have wellness workshops and psychologists coming in on the regular. We're going to do some more workshop type things, and the guys that we have in there right now are really open to all that programming. So that's
huge.
I think the interview process through the BNL list has really helped with that. But yeah, just moving forward, we just want to see more education and more movement through the house.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's great that everybody's starting to buy into those groups and programming too, and be a part of that.
Yeah. For kind of that light supportive housing, this is kind of relatively new.
Yes.
To us. So, we're still ironing out some kinks for sure. But I think it is such, it's part of that housing continuum, right? We want to see more of this type of supportive housing that fills a gap of individuals that may not need that really heavy support, and want to be independent, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is some talks about some movement in Summerside for some type of supportive housing. And I think I would love to see supportive housing, something for solely females too. It seems to be a gap. And yeah, both like, because ours is both male and female, it's co-ed. So you can be either. But yes, individuals who identify as females it's a huge gap for that supportive housing piece. They've really missed out on that. But so hopefully in the future, I think it's the best type of housing to help support the individuals that we deal with.
A lot of people need it. A lot of people need it. I think there's a lot of great things happening in PEI, but there's still a lot more to do.
Yeah. Whether some need it for 3 months, some may need it for 12. But I think that if you talk to everybody, all the service providers around the table, that support housing is probably one of the best options, best solutions to kind of help individuals come out of homelessness.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, like you said. And it's like you said, it hits on that blend of somebody needs a little bit of support, but they want to move towards that independence. So it helps with that transition.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've over-talked ourselves.
All right. Well, thank you both for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been a great discussion. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and spending some time with us today. We've got one more day tomorrow. We'll have Jane Affleck and Chris Clay from Native Council of PEI to talk about Indigenous services and Indigenous individuals. A reminder, if you want to find today's information or any of the other days, you can go to their YouTube channel, the John Howard Society of PEI, or the website. Rae, Ashley, thank you both again for coming in.
Thank you, Josh.
Really
Thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
us.